he's trying to explain away this hadith I just read, which says don't marry black folks, basically, right? Because they're a distorted creature. This is where Muhammad basically says, if you're a faithful Muslim, you won't marry a black person, for they are a distorted creature.
Vocab has participated in many public debates and dialogues with Muslims, Comedics, and especially Hebrew Israelites. He's the author of a book, One West Hebrew Israelism, Street Level Apologetics, and a contributing author to Our God is Triune, Essays in Biblical Theology. He's a freelance contributor for apologetics print publications such as the Christian Research Journal. Vocab, we appreciate you joining us. Brother, the floor is yours.
Hey, Kevin, great to meet you. I think I know one reason I liked you right when I heard you. You like 90s hip hop.
Absolutely.
All right. A man of taste and discernment, I see. Mainly, if you said, what is your presentation, Vocab? Like a bunch of racist quotes. That's kind of what the presentation is. And so let's get into it. Thank you. Appreciate it. Perfect timing. Wow, look at that. Now, when you talk about Black Muslims in the United States, the Pluralism Project, something Harvard does, says that Black Americans make up about 20% of the total of the Muslim population in the United States today. Obviously, that's significant, right? Higher than the 12 or 13% of the total U.S. population that Black Americans are usually projected to be. And so you have what you might consider somewhat of an overrepresentation there. And we've talked about some of the reasons why that happens today. There's a white scholar, Dr. Jonathan Brown, who covers a lot of the issues related to slavery and Islam and blackness, as you can see. He's actually a Muslim, he says. He's a professor at Georgetown, and he does a lot of these because he's written on a lot of it. Now, he's a legitimate scholar, absolutely, but he's sort of a progressive Muslim in a lot of ways and tries to filter Islam through a progressive lens. And in doing so, acts as a sort of apologist for things that have happened in Islamic history. But I don't consider him a liar or a fraud. He does good work. He brings a lot of sources out. And if you're a scholar, there's a certain level of honesty and forthrightness you have to really do it. Oh, I like that. That's not bad. And so you learn a lot reading or listening to him just because of his amount of knowledge that he brings forward. Here's something he said that I found interesting. This is just one quote in regards to the whole concept of anti-blackness. This is Dr. Jonathan Brown. There is no denying that anti-black sentiment is rampant among many Muslims. Now, he is more talking about in the Islamic world. Now, he's going to say what a lot of Muslims would say, which is this is out of line with the Prophet's model to us. This is out of step with his character and what true Islam is. I think if we say that in regards to biblical Christianity, if we were going to say the same thing, we are absolutely right. It's out of step to be a bigot. Out of step. I mean, actually, it's directly in the New Testament. In Islam, it is not so clear if it is really out of step to be anti-black, or at least to look at black folks as lesser than. And not only that, to have all kinds of fear of all kinds of others, as we're going to see as we get into this. It's just usually black folks catch the worst end of it in regards to Islam. But this is what he says, and he even brings up a contemporary example that many of you know. It's seen in the deplorable habit of some Arabs. I wonder if it's some, many, most, some Arabs to refer to black people as abid, slaves. This is indefensible. Well, I agree it's indefensible, but I don't know if it's really indefensible if you look at the Islamic sources. Now, he does a lot of these panels, Zoom things. This is with some Muslims in London, I believe. And that's actually his book, Islam and Blackness. I've read it. You actually will learn a lot. You'll see him defend certain things or try to defend it, but you still learn a lot just because he is doing scholarship. I encourage you guys, if you want to see a perspective of how a Muslim wants to defend these things from a scholastic level, check this out. It'll give you a good idea because he's really cutting edge. He's not the only one on it, but he's cutting edge in how he really does this according to the rigor, in a sense, of modern scholarship, you might say. But kind of flipping around a little bit, another book I'd recommend for a different reason. This is two different editions of it. Ephraim Karsh, Islamic Imperialism. Islamic Imperialism. Now the edition I have is a different color. Got Bin Laden playing peekaboo down here at the bottom. This is published by Yale University Press. A really good book, and you don't really hear Islamic and imperialism can join together as much as you should. If you're going to look at things through the critical lens, which is if you're the majority, if you've been historically part of an oppressor people group, Islam and lots of Arab empires, if we're going to say that, would definitely qualify, but they don't a lot of times because it's often done in a Western context. And it's like, well, but hold on, brown. So through a critical lens, you can't consider them part of an oppressive people group. They're going to always be oppressed, right? This is kind of how these things are shaking out. But a book like this just tells you the truth. You know, it's just not sensationalistic. It just tells you what really happened. And the brother had already brought out the Zanj Rebellion, and I have got to agree with him. Why have we never heard about this? Why do we have to go deep into the history and the annals of Islam to learn about the Zanj Rebellion? Why is it most Muslims you talk to don't know much about the Zanj Rebellion? Why? Why is this is not some conspiracy? This really happened. This painting, by the way, is quite grotesque if you study in depth. Now, as we look at this, we say, okay, what's going on here? Well, I'm gonna read you a little bit about what's going on here with the Zanj Rebellion. Can I do that? Can I do that? I'm going to read you a little bit about it, okay? This is from page 49 of aforementioned book. No sooner had the dust settled on Babak's revolt than the imperial center was rocked by a similarly formidable social rising, this time by the empire's most despised class, the Zanj. Herded by the hundreds and thousands into the labor camps in the salt flats near Basra, without their families or hope and given meager rations of food, these black East African slaves had revolted previously during Umayyad times, and in the autumn of 869, they again rose in strength. Led by a charismatic Iranian Kharijite who claimed Ali descent and styled himself as the Mahdi, put a pause on that. I would imagine what would happen is if I was a Muslim apologist of some sort, I would focus in on this and say, no, this was essentially putting down a heretic uprising, because the man who led it actually wasn't Zanj, ironically enough, and would be by Orthodox Islamic standards a heretic. In fact, his own people got tired of him later on when he started asking them to prescribe prayers in his name. But that doesn't wipe away what was really going on here. This is slave dissatisfaction. Why is this important? And I'm putting it mildly to say dissatisfaction. Muslim apologists usually give us this line, well, our slavery was so much nicer than your guys's. This is the kind of thing we hear. Well, the Zanj Rebellion wasn't the only one, but it was a big one, and we need to talk about it. It doesn't seem like these slaves really wanted to be slaves so much. It doesn't seem like it was so great, really, does it? Resuming reading. They managed to rout the local governors and to establish their own independent entity. Within the year, the rebels were in control of much of southern Iraq and the western Iranian province of Khuzestan. In September 871, they occupied Basra, slaughtering most of its residents, so they were striking back, like Nat Turner type situation, and carrying the rest off as slaves, turnabout, right? For the next 12 years, they continually terrorized the government, and in 879, they nearly reached Baghdad. This is the center. This is the grand city of Islam, okay? This was, however, the limit of their success. For all their efforts, the Zanj failed to win over other sectors of imperial society. A number of Bedouin tribes aside, neither the peasants nor the urban proletariat threw in their lot with the rebels. Religious resentments of the heretic Zanj, together with deep contempt among the indigenous population toward black Africans, nearly 500 years later, the great Muslim historian Ibn Khaldun would describe them as close in their character to dumb animals, end quote, left the rebels isolated. By the summer of 883, they had been crushed by the imperial armies. Their leader was killed and his head was sent on a pole to Baghdad. This violent record underscores, listen to the sentence, yet another striking similarity between the Abbasids and their Umayyad predecessors. Reliance on armed force as the primary means of dynastic survival. End quote from Islamic Imperialism, page 49. Now, ironically enough, this has made it a little bit on the edges of pop culture. Not a big gamer myself, but I am familiar with a certain gaming series, and I'm going to show you something here where they actually feature the Zanj Rebellion, which, in case you didn't catch it from the reading, took place about 868 to 883, led by a former Abbasid official named Ali ibn Muhammad. And the Zanj are essentially Bantu from the southeast from Southeast Africa who were brought into the caliphate as slaves. As mentioned, they were in Iraq, okay? There's a game that you may know called Assassin's Creed. In Assassin's Creed, you can take part in the Zanj Rebellion. Now, in the game, it's a Assassin's Creed Mirage, if you're asking which one it is. They don't really emphasize the fact that these are slaves who were black, This is supposed to be Ali ibn Muhammad, the leader. Now, so he wasn't Zanj himself, as you can see, even in the game's representation. But you can actually be part of this. They just really emphasize that they're rebels, and it shows at very small scale. These are actually screenshots. This is from Assassin's Creed, okay? You being part of the Zanj Rebellion. There's actually videos online how to get the Zanj Rebellion upgrade pack for your armor. You know what I mean? This one's a little more, shows you some guys like, oh, okay. And that's the Assassin's Creed character there on the right. Fascinating, right? In a video game. So if you want to rebel against Islam with some slaves and go wreck shop virtually, you can join the U.S. Army, I guess, or you can play Assassin's Creed on PS5. Now, here's a book I want to bring out. It's very small. It's almost more really of a booklet that I have. Where'd it go? Yeah, there, right here. Very thin little volume called Racism in Islam. Now, the reason why this book is important is because it translates some hadith that are not usually translated in English. So these Christian Arabic speakers translate some, and they give you the sources. I'm showing you an example there where some of the sources are given for some of the hadith I'm about to show you. The challenge is it's a little more difficult to check these. I was able to check a few. Some I called a friend who speaks Arabic and asked him some follow-up questions to confirm everything we checked out was right. So I'm going to read from some of these lesser known hadith from this book, and some of them actually are online, but a lot of them are not translated into English, and you have to go actually track through Scribd and Archive in Arabic to find some of the original quotes. But this one, I know it's a little small to see, but if you look, this is from a Shia website. Okay, this is a Shia collection. This is from Al-Kafi. And what it says, it has the Arabic, of course, and then in this hadith, it also has the English. And listen what it says. Be aware of marrying the people of Al-Zanj, for they are a distorted creature. Now, that one's right there. This is one of the few that I could find translated. A lot of the other ones I'm about to share will not be, they're going to be translated when I read them from the Christian sources, but a lot of them you can't find in a lot of collections. Some of them are Sunni, and some of them are also considered weaker hadith, and that's why. However, they're in the record. They're all over. Now, some of these, the one I just read, are well enough known that they end up in these ask a question where you have this question and you ask it, and people are saying, hey, what's the deal with this? And here you have an Islamic scholar who answers, and he says, number one, he's trying to explain away this hadith I just read, which says don't marry black folks, basically, right? Because they're a distorted creature. Now, specifically, you could say, it's just East Africans. Well, you get the idea because of Zanj, who they are. Our principle is we are all the same and equal, and our virtue over others is only in taqwa. So this is just saying in your religious practice. But see, this is not what the sources say. That's what he's saying. That's a modernist take on this issue. Two, not every narration mentioned is to be taken as authentic. Many narrations are fabricated. Now, we know that, but you could already see what the cop-out is. Thirdly, he says not everything is literal, but what are you going to try to say? What's not literal about this? Fourthly, this is his answer, and the one we just read that says the Zanj are a distorted creature. There are narrations about the people of Kufa or the people of Esfahani and not loving the Ahlul Bayat. If authentic, it could be referring to a group of people or a certain situation or specific for time, not generally and forever. So isolating it, right? But it says the Zanj are a distorted creature. So this just doesn't work. Think about what the Hadith says versus what this says, right? And the Hadith is supposed to be from Muhammad, by the way. The word Zanj, Zanj, has numerous meanings and does not only mean black people. In principle, our Islamic values condemn such an attitude and is categorically rejected. Therefore, it must be referring to something else other than what is commonly taken as its meaning. The fifth one is, to me, the most ludicrous. He says, well, it could be something else. Doesn't tell us what other word it could mean, right? But just since we know Muhammad is so loving it, it must be something else. This is a scholar. So you get a flavor of how these are answered. Now, let me show you a similar one. This one is narrated by Aisha and Anas ibn Malik. So you see, there's the chain already, the beginning of the hadith chain. Listen to what it says. Seek to marry and give in marriage the competent, and be careful in choosing mates for your offspring, and beware of marrying the Zanj, for he is a distorted creature. This is classified as weak, yet it's in 23 references. Some of them are on the screen listed. Similar, listen to this one. This is actually even more hard when you think about it. Listen to this. This is where Muhammad basically says, if you're a faithful Muslim, you won't marry a black person. Whoever believes in Allah on the last day, let him not participate in the lineage of the Zanj. That's from Al-Tajani, source on the screen. Okay, and remember, the Zanj are black-skinned African people. Now, some of these just have sort of a racist spirit behind them, these hadith, because you could almost defend these, I guess, if you're a Muslim, to say, but it's not saying, well, just let's read it. It's supposed to be by Muhammad, and Al-Tajani comments on these. At the bottom, it says, I count these two hadiths as dispraise of the black-skinned people. Yeah, that's exactly what they are. Now, listen to what it says. A black woman who can bear children is better than a beautiful woman who is barren. So someone might say, well, look, this is saying you can marry a black woman and bear children with her. This isn't racist, but notice what it's saying. It's basically saying the least desirable type of woman you can have is better if you can have kids with her. And it contrasts with a beautiful woman. This is a common thing that happens often. Like, listen to the Ethiopian, even if he's raisin-headed. That's, though Muslims will say, yeah, it's saying listen to black leaders. Yeah, but it's saying if you have the worst leader possible. It's obvious, the racist spirit behind it. Next one. A black slave woman who is religious is better than a beautiful woman who is not religious. Okay, these are supposed to be backhanded compliments, I suppose. Now, there's also a story about a companion of Muhammad who was named black, and Muhammad renamed him white. This one was the hardest one to track down the original source. It comes out of a interesting little book. Again, it's on the screen there, and it's also in here. So some of these are not translated, but I wanted to share some lesser known and weaker anecdotes, and we're going to continue to do that. Here you're going to have a warning by Ali ibn Abu Talib. This is the fourth caliph, Muhammad's cousin. Listen to what he says. And you notice that there's a lot of similarity in a lot of these hadith. So you say, well, it sounds like someone said this early on, because look how similar these are, right? Be wary of marrying the Zanj, for verily it is a deformed creation. Now, someone would say, oh, well, look at the collection. It's from a Shiite scholar. Okay, that's what you can say, but it's not only Shia. Now, let's say it wasn't from a Shiite scholar. What do they say in response? They'll say, well, it's weak. It's weak. See, there's always a way out. What if this is just stuff that Muhammad and his companion said since jump? What about that answer? That's not possible. We don't have phrases like from Jesus like this running around. You know, the closest you could come up is something where at the end of the Gospel of Thomas, where the pseudo Jesus says, "Oh, don't worry, I'll let her get into heaven. I'll do it by changing her into a man." If you've ever read Thomas, and the last Logia says this. No, this is the kind of closest thing, and we've been rejecting that since the beginning. You know, but there's a whole bunch of this stuff floating around by your guy. Jafar al-Sadiq, founder of the Shiite doctrine. Listen to what he said. Do not marry the Zanj and the Khazar. That's interesting. That's like a Turkish or Armenian people. There's some kind of conspiracy theories, to be honest, that all Jews are actually Khazar. But so you see double racism there. Do not marry the Zanj and the Khazar. Verily, for their wombs show no loyalty, he said. And there are no one who is intelligent in Hind, Sind, and Kwan, referring to Kandahar. So these are Indian and Afghanistan peoples that he's referring to there. Now, this is from Abu Huraira. Look what he says. Muhammad said, right? The messenger of Allah said, Ham begot the Copts and Berbers, in none of whom there is good. Now, this is part of a whole list where he's saying all these people groups and their lineage and how there's certain ones are no good. Why does it matter to bring in Ham into this, or Ham? Because Ham is understood to be the one who sort of descendants are the ones who populated Africa. Now, he mentions two African peoples here, the Copts and Berbers, but he's basically saying none of the children of Ham are any good. You see what I'm saying? This is according to the source of what Muhammad said. Now, the next ones I'm going to share are mainly things that came out of Bernard Lewis's book, Race and Slavery in the Middle East. Bernard Lewis is a scholar of well-known, renowned, really, or well-regarded, and covers a lot of interesting topics. And he's just a great resource. I would encourage everyone interested in this topic to get this book. You really need to get this book. You need to have this book. You need to read this book. You see, I got mine bookmarked. This is a book to get. I'm going to share some things out of here now. You're going to see some more racial discrimination in marriage. All right. Do not intermarry with the sons of Ham. So again, don't marry folks who are black. It's not just Zanj here. All right. For they are distorted among God's creatures apart from Ibn Aqua. This is literally like the racist who says, I don't like them, but that one, he's okay. My neighbor, he's all right now. He lets me use his sugar and gave me a jump in my truck once. He's all right now. This is literally what's going on here. These black folks, not so sure. Don't marry him. They're distorted. But, Ibn Aqua, he's cool. Why? Ibn Aqua was the companion of Muhammad. it's like you can't even make this stuff up. Again, sources are on the screen. Now we're going to get a little bit farther away from Muhammad's time. So we're going to the 9th century, a jurist here. Listen to this. But you'll see the reason why I'm bringing these up, and you say, well, these are kind of separated here, is to show you the continuity in thought. This is not separate or distinct from stuff that Muhammad and the companion said. It's right in line with it. Listen to this. A black woman may be repudiated if there is no blackness in her family. Likewise, a scald-headed, because such things are covered by kinship. I misspelled kinship there. I didn't know. My bad when I was typing. Okay, this is kind of confusing at first, but you got to keep some things in mind. And Bernard Lewis brings out the commentary on this as well. Keep in mind, first of all, the Muslim groom can't see the bride uncovered until after marriage, okay? If she's uncovered and is black or scabby, he can actually repudiate her. This is what the ruling is saying. Unless it was already known that her family had black members or were scabby already, because then you don't have any grounds to be shocked or surprised or to raise a complaint if she's part of a black or scabby family. Now, listen to what it's saying. It's literally saying if you find out your bride is black, you could reject her unless you already knew it. And notice what it compares black to, somebody who's scabby. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, this is what's going on, man. Now, sometimes they did marry, though, and someone might say, look, they did marry. Well, okay, but watch. Again, source on the screen. This is a Qadi of Mecca. This Zubair died 870, and he told this anecdote. This is wild, man. This anecdote made me laugh in a kind of a dark, sad way. Listen to this. A woman came to Ibn al-Zubair to complain about her husband, all right, who she claimed was sleeping with her maidservant. So a woman comes to complain, says, hey, my husband's sleeping with a maidservant. Now, listen, he's going to investigate this, sort of a judge in the matter, right? Ibn al-Zubair summoned the man and questioned him about his wife's complaint. Listen to the man's response. He replied, she is black and her maidservant is black and my eyesight is weak. When night falls, I grab whichever is nearest to me. Bruh. What is this, bro? That's his excuse. The whole thing is replete with problems. But yeah, Islam. Now, when there was offspring, notice, by the way, you got black wife, but black maidservant. Apparently, this guy's saying, I can't tell them apart in the dark. That's literally what he's saying. He said, grab whoever's nearest to me. There's a stigma attached to African ancestry, commonly in Islam. And as Bernard Lewis brings out, many stories are told of people with an African mother or grandmother with a dark complexion who are subject to insult, humiliation. And he gives an example here. This is a little like a diss rap that apparently would be given. Listen to this. Your father is your father and you are his son. Miserable little son and miserable father. Your mother is a short-necked black woman with fingers like dung beetles. Dung beetles for fingers. Like, so the ultimate diss is like to say your mom is a short-necked black woman with fingers like dung beetles. It's also a way to say your mom basically is a slave, because even to this present day in North Africa, a man with Negroid features, even of the highest social status, is sometimes described as Oud Kadim, which means the son of a slave woman. And in the midst of all this, you have some African poets. A famous one, Suhaim, he was sort of ambivalent about Islam. And I know I'm mispronouncing a lot of these names. I apologize. I'm doing my best. It's on the screen, so you don't have to rely upon my dumb tongue. Listen what he said. Though I am black of color, my character is white. He's the first African-born poet in early Islamic Arabia. And his name actually means little black boy. This is a derisive name given to him. He was killed by immolation, which means fire, death by fire, circa 657. He's actually considered the first poet burnt to death in Islam. What a strange, anyways. So in theory, the Muslims will say we're equal, but in practice, not so much. One caliph gave an opinion of a black slave he received as a gift. Source here on the screen. And this is what he said when he received the gift of a black slave. Had you been able to find a smaller number than 1 and a worse color than black, you would have sent that as a gift. Bro. He's saying you literally went out of your way to give me the worst gift possible. If you could have gave me nothing and a worse color than black, that would have been your gift, it appears, because you went out of your way to give me the worst gift possible, a black slave. That's what he's saying. Okay, so clearly black people are seen as less than human. This is a well-known quote, and I believe the brother earlier actually alluded to this one. I've alluded to it earlier, but here's the fuller quote. Therefore, the Negro nations are, as a rule, submissive to slavery because Negroes have little that is essentially human and have attributes that are quite similar to those of dumb animals. That's Ibn Khaldun, famous Muslim historian. Another good book I'm going to recommend on this topic, Bill Warner's book called The Islamic Doctrine of Slavery. The Doctrine of Slavery in Islamic Institution. And he mentions how the practice of Islamic slavery is alive and well today, has been brought out today. And he shows some sources that apparently these hadiths show that the angels are racist too. Gabriel came to Muhammad and said, if a black man comes to you, his heart is grosser than a donkey's. Okay. There are multiple traditions where Muhammad forbids intermarriage, as already discussed. For example, do not bring black into your pedigree. Source on the screen. Screenshot all these, right? I don't want to read everyone with my bad pronunciation. Black is often associated with slave. The bit said, this is one of Muhammad's men, it is your folly to fight the apostle, for Allah's army is bound, I left out the end, sorry about another typo there, to disgrace you. We brought them to the pit. Hell was their meeting place. We collected them there, black slaves, men of no descent. That's how black slaves are described as, men of no descent. Now, the next one I'm going to share is a little bit different. It's just to show sort of, because you might think, oh, well, so there's a pan-Arab or pan-Muslim alliance together sort of against black by Muslims. Not so much. Nasser, Egyptian president, really dictator, they kind of put hopes on him back like in the 50s that he could be a guy to unite everybody. But he wasn't fond of the Arab world or the world around him of Muslims. Listen to this quote from him. This is something else right here. Iraqis are savage. The Lebanese venal and morally degenerate. Okay. The Saudis dirty. The Yemenis hopelessly backward and stupid. And the Syrians irresponsible, unreliable, and treacherous. That's something else. And I'm trying to see. I got the full source for you for that, but I'll give it to you later. It's in the bottom of my notes, and I don't have access to it right now. Two of the books I want to recommend are Ronald Segal's Islam's Black Slaves. I have one with a different cover here, but History of Africa's Other Black Diaspora. It's a good book to get. And missionary and pastor preacher Peter Hammond, his book, my cover is somewhat different than the one on the screen, Slavery, Terror, and Islam, The Historical Roots of Contemporary Threat. That's a good book as well, and he's got a lot of up close and personal views of it. Okay, so now we're going to look at some quotes from Islamic history. This is sort of the timeline of where we're going to go through. And so some of these folks, every one of these people I'm going to mention are important or significant. Some are Shia, and you'll see sometimes people saying, oh, well, that doesn't count. That doesn't work. Oh, you want the Bernard Lewis quotes? All right, I'll try to do that, Greg. I see your comment there. That's a good idea. Let me try to, I might have to grab that. I got it over here on the side, but first let me get to these and see if I can. All right, Al-Jahaz, you see the dates on the screen. Here's what he says. And notice how, again, similar these are. I think the gentleman brought this one up earlier, actually. We know that the Zanj are the least intelligent and the least discerning of mankind and the least capable of understanding the consequences of actions. Another one by him. They, and here he's talking about, listen to this. They maintain that eloquence is prized by all people at all times. Even the Zanj, despite their dimness, their boundless stupidity, their obtuseness, their crude perceptions, and their evil dispositions, make long speeches. Oh my goodness. He's saying that even the worst, the least human people around that we can imagine, and look how he just derides them, boundless stupidity. I mean, that's a whole nother level. Even they, to a certain extent, prize eloquence, is what he's saying. Al-Jahiz, like the crow among mankind are the Zanj, for they are the worst of men and the most vicious of creatures in character and temperament. Ibn Khatayaba is from Iraq. Blacks are ugly and misshapen because they live in a hot country. This is a common thing given where you'll see like this idea of like the climate is responsible for the misfortunes of the people. Here's a medieval Muslim geographer. Of the neighbors of the Buja, Makdisi had heard that there is no marriage among them. The child does not know his father, and they eat people, but God knows best. As for the Zanj, they are people of black color, flat noses, kinky hair, and little understanding or intelligence. And I believe the brother had read part of that one earlier as well, so we've got some overlap. Ibn Sina, this is Hafiz, Islamic psychologist, scholar, theologian. Blacks are people who are by their very nature slaves. Now, the brackets are because the subject is not supplied in the particular sentence, but that's the subject under consideration. So it's put in there for context. You understand who's being talked about there. Ibn Hazm, God has decreed that the most devout is the noblest, even if he be a negress's bastard, and that the sinner and unbeliever is at the lowest level, even if he be the son of the prophets. So again, it's this thing of like, well, lineage doesn't really matter. Let me give you the worst example and then the best example, just so we can have contrast here. So the worst would be, if you're devout, you're a noble, even if you're a negress's bastard. And if you're a sinner, you're at the low level, even if you're a son of the prophets. Nasir al-Din al-Tusi is Shia, Grand Ayatollah, in the 13th century. If all types of men are taken from the first and one placed after another, like the Negro from Zanzibar, in the southernmost countries, the Negro does not differ from an animal in anything except the fact that his hands have been lifted from the earth, saying he doesn't walk on all fours. That's it. And no other peculiarity or property except for what God wished. Many have seen that the ape is more capable of being trained than the Negro and more intelligent. Whew. Some of you thought that Trump tweet was bad. Look at this. By the way, it was bad. Ibn Khaldun. I know we read the first one a number of times, but notice here is the whole idea of the naturally submissive to slavery. This is a common thing that you actually see when you get into Southern apologists in the United States. Same kind of thing. It's like, well, this is how it's supposed to be. It's the natural way of things, and don't you know? Beyond known peoples of Black West Africa, to the south, there is no civilization in the proper sense. There are only humans who are closer to dumb animals than to rational beings. They live in thickets and caves and eat herbs and unprepared grain. They frequently eat each other. They cannot be considered human beings. The best way to justify killing another people group is to dehumanize them. Look at the abortion issue. Sunan ibn Majah, do not marry women for their beauty, which may destroy them, or for their money, which may corrupt them, for religion. A slit-nosed black slave woman, if pious, is preferable. The number of the things we'll see sometimes are from European explorers or travelers. And the thing is, they're kind of giving us reports about the outside world. Now, if I was a Muslim apologist, I might say, well, you can't trust them. But the thing is, that's the only way we get some of these objective early reports, because they understood it to be barbaric, but they're not going to get this from the Muslims themselves, really. All right. So what do we have here? The price of a white slave girl is usually from treble to tenfold that of an Abyssinian. That'd be like a common name that you would give to black folks, sometimes even regardless of where they came from. Sometimes it's associated with Ethiopia. And the price of a black girl about half or 2/3 or considerably more if well instructed in the art of cookery. So if she's a good cook, more. The black slaves are generally employed as menials. Now, you actually see this similar with the trading scenario where Muhammad had to trade 2 black slaves. So you see this same type of thing, Equality, al-Tabari. Because I want to kind of end some of this, which is showing how there's an Arab-centric element to a lot of this, and it doesn't go away. It's just muted in the modern era, sometimes at least, in certain settings. Arabs are the most noble people in lineage, the most prominent, and the best in deeds. We were the first to respond to the call of the prophet. We are Allah's helpers and the viziers of his messenger. We fight people until they believe in Allah. Yeah, you do. He who believes in Allah and his messenger has protected his life and possessions from us. As for one who disbelieves, we will fight him forever on Allah's cause. Killing him. Wait, I can't even. Killing him is a small matter to us. Yep. And you ask yourself, do you really think this attitude has disappeared? No, of course not. Ibn Taymiyyah. A man married a maid slave who bore him a child. Would that child be free, or would he be an own slave? Her child, whom she bore from him, would be the property of her master according to all the imams, because the child follows the status of the mother in freedom or slavery. If the child is not of the race of Arabs, then he is definitely a known slave according to the scholars. But the scholars disputed his status among themselves if he was from the Arabs, whether he must be enslaved or not, because when Aisha had a maid slave who was an Arab, Muhammad said to Aisha, set this maid free because she is from the children of Ishmael. Notice the favoritism there. So if you've seen Django Unchained, not saying you should, but honestly, this is a little crude, but black Muslims defending Muhammad and all these historical abuses is a little bit like Samuel Jackson's character and Leonardo DiCaprio's character in Django Unchained. And then they end up like that. Oh, man. I did something else there. All right, that is the end of my presentation on my end. Again, I really want to compliment all the other presenters. Great work, amazing stuff, very well organized. Mine have felt like it was a little more all over. And I know some of you guys wanted some of the other sources. I got them right here. I'll drop them in the chat if you have a specific one, but I'm going to end there, and glad to be part of this.
Welcome to the Black Man in Islam Conference presented by Ministry to Muslims. I am your host, Kevin Briggins, Managing Director for the Center for Biblical Unity. We have now reached the time where we're going to jump into our panel discussion. And this discussion is on the Islamic threat to the church and the Black community. And so if we can bring on our panelists and we can just kind of dive into this conversation. And so the topic is the Islamic threat to the church and the Black community. And so I have some questions, but these are more just kind of conversation starters. And so I'll just start it off with, when we use the phrase Islamic threat, what specifically do we mean? Are we referring to theology? We talking about political Islam, extremism, cultural influence, or something else, or all of the above? Just kind of, what are your thoughts when you think of the Islamic threat to the church and the Black community? What comes to mind for you? And Greg, why don't we start off with you?
Well, it goes back to the presupposition again, Kevin, where the Muslims go ahead and say that Islam is your religion as a Black man. That's your religion. Christianity is a white religion. Christianity has a white God. Christianity is a slave religion. So they use that presupposition. And when you and I can tell you, when I was because I've been a Christian for quite a while, but when I was working on my undergrad, I studied, I don't know if you know who Dr. Joseph Ben Yakinan and another gentleman named Amin Ra, and they start using those presuppositions. I'm like, I start kind of gravitating a little bit towards Black theology and Black nationalism, and then also the late Khalid Muhammad. And I just
I can't believe you used to like this guy. Sorry, go ahead.
We the
Dr.
Black
Ben.
Jews.
Yeah. That's Dr. Ben's book.
Yes, it is. And then I started doing a study on my own, Kevin, and I started seeing holes in what was being taught. As I mentioned before, the God of the Bible doesn't look at race; he looks at grace. And I'm not going to use all my cliches again, but the Bible doesn't stress skin; it stresses the need to have your sins forgiven. The gospel accounts aren't black gospels, white gospels, yellow gospels, brown gospels. They're red gospels, and it's the blood of Christ shed for all mankind. So I'm talking about the theological points and seeing that God is spirit. Jesus did not say, you guys, that my skin color is the way, the truth, and the life. He said, he talked about his character and about himself, that he's the way, the truth, and the life. And when I started seeing, I meant the excellent job that Vocab did, that Io, that Lewis did, when they're showing and exposing Islam and exposing its involvement with slavery and the derogatory remarks made by Muhammad towards people of African descent, I meant that just cemented that how can you go ahead and be a Muslim? And then I remembered, like I said, reading the Bible and then reading the hadiths and seeing this. It just opened up my eyes. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
But Kevin, you guys, it's hidden. It's hidden from the Muslims. This history is hidden from them.
Yeah. And you guys did such a good job of pointing to the fact of this is kind of rooted in the heart of Islam, right? Because I always tell people the reason Islam and Christianity is so different, right, is because what it looks like to follow Jesus is completely different than what it looks like to follow Muhammad, right? If Muhammad is the way of life of righteousness in which you should live and you have to imitate, well, when you look at the life of Muhammad, it's hard to make that argument, right? And a lot of the things we're talking about are fundamentally found within Muhammad's life, and Muslims justify the way they live by saying this is what Muhammad did.
Let me interject this real quickly, Kevin.
Go ahead.
Again, it goes back to like the sources that were quoted by the panel here. The average black Muslim or Muslim is not aware of what the hadiths, the tafsirs, what they go ahead and say. I was on the live stream. I always go on live streams to debate different people, and I was on the Muslim live stream. And every time I go on there, they kick me off. But I bring up about Muhammad and his racism and things that he went ahead and said. And they, instead of trying to answer me, they blocked me.
Vocab, I see you got another book, man. What you got?
Well, I have a little thing I was going to read. One thing from Robert Spencer's book, The Politically Incorrect Guide to Islam and the Crusades, because a lot of times you'll hear this myth that, well, the native Christians of the Middle East and North Africa, they welcomed the Muslims as liberators. And so you'll see this Islamic expansionism and imperialism kind of played down as if they were essentially requested to be liberators. And it's like the idea of come on in. And so I want to give some context and then read a quote here from a contemporary observer. So it's December 639. General Amir began the invasion of Egypt. Remember, Egypt is essentially a Christian country at this point. It has problems, certainly, but a Christian country for all intents and purposes. November 642, Alexandria fell, and virtually all of Egypt was in Muslim hands. But it was not uncontested, and the Muslims met all resistance with brutality. In one Egyptian town, they set a pattern of behavior that they followed all over the country. And here's the contemporary report. Quote, then the Muslims arrived in Nikiu. There was not one single soldier to resist them. They seized the town and slaughtered everyone they met in the street and in the churches, men, women, and children, sparing nobody. Then they went to other places, pillaged and killed all the inhabitants they found. But let us now say no more, for it is impossible to describe the horrors the Muslims committed when they occupied the island of Nikiu. And not only were Christians killed, but others as well and enslaved. Listen to this. Amir oppressed Egypt. He took considerable booty from this country and a large number of prisoners. The Muslims returned to their country with booty and captives. The patriarch Cyprus felt deep grief at the calamities in Egypt because Amir, who was of barbarian origin, showed no mercy in his treatment of the Egyptians and did not fulfill the covenants which had been agreed with him. And you see the same pattern elsewhere. I got some more quotes, but I just think it's important to show what really happened, because you'll hear things like, well, it was spread organically, or the Christians welcomed us as liberators. This is all spin. This is all spin. And it's important to look at some of the contemporary accounts as well. Okay, good. The brothers are here. Okay, good. Just wanted to add that.
Yeah. Anyone else want to jump in?
Well, Vocab reminded me of a book by Bat Yeor. It's called The Dhimmi, Jews and Christians under Islam. And she documents a long history of how Jews and Christians were treated under Islamic rule. We always hear about the coexistence, and sure, there's been temporary and situational peace and coexistence. But when Islam is fully implemented and Muslims practice their law, Sharia, and for everybody out there, when you say Sharia law, you're being redundant. Sharia means law, so it's Islamic Sharia. So you're just saying law when you say Sharia law. So say either Islamic.
Man, you came really close to starting the Shahada there, brother.
So it is. So it's say either Sharia, Islamic Sharia, or Islamic law, but don't say Sharia law, because it's just saying law. Basically.
What's that?
Don't. So I have a speech impediment too, by the way. So what you want to do is just look at this book. It's by Bat Yeor, B-A-T, and her last name Y-E''OR, Bat Yeor. It's an excellent read. It's very heartbreaking to read how the Muslims treated the Jews and the Christians once they have the rule over them. And so it hasn't been nice. It's not going to be nice if it continues. And they do seek for that domination. So as I see it, it's all of the above. It's both, it's religious, political, moral. Every aspect of life is going to be affected by the Muslims once they are able to execute their religious practices to the full extent, as Muhammad laid it out. But just again, for the record, it's like communism. There is no true Islamic nation where they are fully practicing the laws and the mandates and the theology and the philosophy of Islam. They're fragmented. They don't have a true caliph. They're compromising. There's a lot of watering down of their religion, such as like with communism. You can never truly reach that true communist state. There's always a contradiction or a breakdown before you reach true communism. Well, likewise with Islam, to truly practice and implement Islam is very difficult, but even a high degree of it is not good for humanity. So we should think that just because they can't reach that perfect Islamic state, that we shouldn't worry about it. We really should.
Yeah. I've dealt with many who are tried to reach that true Islamic state, to try to bring back the caliphate and be the caliph. And we've seen how that goes. We've seen what it looks like when ISIS takes over a region of the Middle East. It is not good. And it is not good for human flourishing, as you pointed out. Ayo, do you have any thoughts on, like, in your context, when you think of the Islamic threat to the church and the community, what do you think about?
Yeah, I thought it was a great question. I've been thinking about it even since listening to these last couple answers. And, you mentioned different spheres of it. You said there's a theological impact, a political, and then I think you might have said military.
Extremism and cultural influence. Yeah.
I don't necessarily. So looking at kind of working backwards, yes, Islamic terrorism happens. Yes, there's extremism. And I think that is a real threat in the sense of like national security. But in terms of Black people and the church, I think that the biggest threat comes from, I almost don't even want, I'm going to say political Islam, but I'm going to nuance this, because I feel like your average Muslim doesn't know the things that we've talked about today. Your average Muslim doesn't know about many of the core tenets of their ideology. And so if that's the case, you have to ask yourself, okay, why is it so attractive then for so many people? And I think, personally speaking, that one of the biggest reasons that the church is threatened by Islam is because of the fact that one is the church, we're not really equipping people in the greater context of our theology. So for example, it can be so often where you hear sermons about end times or this or that. And like, we all have our views about those things. I'm not saying you shouldn't talk about them, but when I think Eddie Dalcour, who speaks on this channel a lot, often asks, how often have you heard a sermon about the biblical basis for the Trinity in relation to like the mark of the beast or something like that? And the difference is like night and day. And so that doesn't mean people can't go and do their own study. But I think as a collective, when a congregation is not equipped, they start asking questions and they say, okay, well, how does this work? How can God be 3 in 1 and this and that and all these sorts of things? And then here come these Muslims who capitalize off of literally that ignorance, not an insult, but just literally that ignorance. And they say, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Over here in Islam, we believe in one God. We believe in this. We believe in that. They tell you the things you just, they think you want to hear. And that gets many people in. And I think that in tandem with that, this is a big phenomenon, not just exclusive to Islam, that I've often commented about. Islam also highly benefits from two different things. The first being a large reliance on aesthetics. So for example, you look at some of these mosques, beautiful, right? The architecture, all these different things, a lot of the ways like the different Qurans are designed. There's this emphasis on aesthetics that I think reels a lot of people in and kind of desensitizes them from actually caring about, okay, like what does this actually teach? Like what is the evidence for this? I mean, in early church, Christians were meeting in homes under persecution, under pain of death. So we didn't always have these aesthetics of having this nice building or this or that. So you can't, like, I understand the pull toward that, but you can't make that the basis. Because I've seen images of mosques and stuff, and I'm like, this is beautiful. But I'm never going to make that the basis on which I follow something. And then the second thing that Islam has going for it is a much stronger emphasis on the collective as well, right? They call themselves the Ummah. They call themselves this house of Islam in relation to the kuffar, the house of the unbelievers. And so there's been viral videos going around even just the last couple of days or so in Times Square. All the Muslims gather in there, bowing down, praying. They're on the microphone with the speaker saying, we're going to take over. You don't see Christians speaking like that. And I'm not saying they should. I'm just simply noting that there's a clear difference in that regard. So I think it's those three things. I think it's a lack of actual understanding of Christian theology. These people get reeled in by those who prey on that lack of understanding, get them to appeal to things like the beauty of certain things, the architecture, whatever it may be, as well as the emphasis on the collective and being a part of something. Because it's human nature to want to be a part of something. Yeah. I think all of those things, as crazy as it sounds, can be enough to motivate an entire populace to go after, these sorts of things. Because many of Islam's earliest followers didn't have a robust theological understanding either. They were just simply given this promise of, hey, if you die for the sake of Allah, you'll go to paradise. Yeah. And so I know that there's a lot more that can be said, but I think even without getting into the deep theology of it, which of course we can do as well, which we've done today, many people just simply don't know, as Greg said. So
yeah, I'll add something to what you said, because I mean you're spot on, and for the sake of this conversation, this is about the Black community, and so specifically looking at the church that resides in the Black community, known as the Black church, we can talk about that lack of discipleship is because the church has largely failed to do its job. It has largely failed to properly evangelize and disciple. And anyone who has heard me speak on my channel and the work that I do, a lot of that points back to the church being flipped from its real true mission, which is those two things, evangelism and discipleship, and turned into a hub of political activism, right? And that's largely what we get a lot of. It's a lot of political activism. And then, of course, there's all forms of theology like liberation theology, health and wealth, prosperity gospel, all those types of things that seem to be more prominent than a healthy biblical, understanding of the scriptures. And then you combine that with what I call the grievance culture of the Black community, and Islam is just primed to come in and take advantage of those two things, right? because, like I said, a lot of this stuff isn't known, and so this identity that Christianity is the white man's religion, and everything that has happened to your people is because of Christianity. That grievance and that constant grievance culture that we often see, Islam just comes in and takes advantage of it and gives people not just a source for grievance, but it gives them a source of identity and home, right? The stuff Greg talked about. God is a black man and the white man is the devil. Amen to that. I'm down with that. That's what you get a lot of, and it really draws people in to that.
Somebody's gonna clip that right there.
I hope
man, it's a devil. Amen to that. I'm down with that.
Yeah,
You guys can add this.
Go ahead.
A lot of times they don't want to know. I had a situation at a mosque. I think it was in Vocab's neighborhood in Arizona, and I was speaking to a black Muslim outside of the mosque. And the moment I brought up that Muhammad was a slaver and a racist, he shut down and didn't want to hear it. I said, but I have the references. I can show them to you. And he did not even want to hear the references. And I was like, why would you not want to hear this information? And he got violent. He swatted at me, tried to knock down my camera and the book I had, and just did not want to hear it. And I've had that happen several times where the moment you bring the subject up, they don't even want to hear the references that are there sometimes. And so they would prefer to just stay ignorant of that than to know the facts. And then they have to make a serious life-changing decision on it. And
I wanted to touch on what Io kind of talked about, and also Lewis. And I wanted to give 3 responses. Number one, I can remember I seen some Christians that were fellowshipping. They had an interfaith meeting with Muslims, and they were inviting Muslims to come and speak. And the Muslims were talking about how highly of them, and they were like angels and just really nice people. And then I start quoting what the Quran says, as I read the Quran and the hadiths, and the people didn't like that. And I says, well, you need to know the Quran. This book here is nothing but a war manual. Number 2, a couple years ago, this is a while back, maybe about 10 years ago, a church back south had invited Louis Farrakhan to go ahead and speak. And so, he's speaking about issues within the black community and stuff. But then he started talking about their epistemology and stuff. So I called over there and talked to the head pastor and said, why are you inviting the cultists and the false prophet in your church? The Bible in Ephesians 5 says not to have a fellowship with unfruitful works of darkness, but rather to expose it. So the pastor started attacking me. And then the last thing, you guys, is the Muslims have a PR, and this touches on what Lewis says, and it paints Muhammad as a saint, as just a godly person who was really loving, and he loved everyone, even the black people, white people, everyone. He's a loving man, and so you have the Muhammad of myth, and then you have the historical Muhammad, and they're 2 different people.
Yeah.
Really quick to that, because Greg just reminded me of something I should have mentioned in my lecture, was the question of Muhammad's final sermon, where he supposedly said, and you'll get this from the Muslims as a way of excusing Muhammad and saying that he wasn't racist, where he supposedly said that there was no difference between an Arab and a non-Arab, a white man or a black man. And they'll reference the Sirah literature, the biography of Muhammad. The problem with that is that the earliest Sirah material doesn't contain those words. That comes from a hadith, and the dating of those hadiths is much later. So, and also the earlier, or one of the hadith narrators doesn't say white, it says red, which was a reference, obviously, to some of the pagans and the other people around, maybe the Romans and others, but it's not the word white, it's the word red. There was no difference between a red man and a black. And that got translated into the white man and the black man to try to bring it into our time and our culture to excuse Muhammad. But again, the earliest biography and record of that sermon, that final speech of Muhammad, does not contain those words. So that's something that was interpolated into the later Sirah literature.
Yeah.
Cora Day. Could we hear
yeah.
from that, brother? I want to see what's going on in his context.
Yeah. Hey, brother, I don't know if you heard the original question, but I was just asking, when you think of the Islamic threat to the church and the community, kind of what comes to mind for you? And I know in your context, brother, that can mean something completely different than ours. So just wanted to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kelvin. Yes, so in my context, is radically unique. For Nigeria or for a Nigerian, when you're thinking about Islam as a threat, is actually practical. For the most part, most Nigerians think of Islam as something barbaric, especially because of the radical Islamic activities that we've had in this nation. And because of that, it has really impacted the way the church engage with Islam. So I'm actually from the southern part of Nigeria, and in this part of Nigeria, you could actually engage a Muslim. You want to preach the gospel to them. You want to talk to them. You want to have a open conversation. We have a debate. We usually have a debate with the Muslims in this part of Nigeria. But then in the north is a different ball game. Despite the fact that this is a sort of a threat to the Christians in the north, even the Christians in the south are not willing to engage with the Muslims. Okay, so the few ones that are talking to the Muslims are us. We are the one engaging with the Muslims. We are the one that want to have a debate with them. So imagine on a Sunday morning, a pastor in between his preaching wanted to talk about Islam. He just wanted to mention something about Islam. Now, at that point in time, he has his microphone on. But because he want to talk about Islam, he had to switch off his microphone, speak into the congregation, and then after that, he put on the microphone again. The level of fear that we have, even in the southern part of Nigeria, how much more those who are in the north? Nobody want to speak ill of Islam. Your church might be burnt. The Muslims might come after you, they might come for you, and you might jolly well be killed. So because of that, when Christians, especially in the southern part of Nigeria, pastors, when they see a Christian talking about Islam, when they see apologists engaging Islam, they will rather want to shut you down. They will tell you, please don't create a problem. We don't want you to talk about this, okay? Don't let the sleepy dog lie, all right? Don't say anything about it. So the threat of Islam in Nigeria is very much real. It's real to such an extent that Christians, for the most part, do not want to have any conversation with Muslims, because for the most part, Christians are angry with the Muslims. They hate Islam, and by extension, they hate the Muslims. Okay, so because of that, they don't want to have a conversation. Now, in the southern part of Nigeria, we have in a family a combination of different religions. So in my family, I have siblings that are Muslims. I am a Christian, and that is the way it is in this part of Nigeria. But then in the northern part of Nigeria, some places, if you are a Christian and you were formerly a Muslim, sometimes it can lead to death. Sometimes it leads to being ostracized from the family. The parent might decide to disown their children. And sometimes it might even, mean that you lose everything that you have because you're not out of the Ummah, you're out of the Islamic community. So this has really impacted and also affected the relationship between the Christians and the Muslims in Nigeria. So it's such a very real situation, especially with what we're having right now in Nigeria, the genocide that is going on in Nigeria. That has created a sort of, impact, and then a shift, a sort of dichotomy and a gap between the Christians and the Muslims. So, and I hope this was helpful. Thank you.
No, absolutely. And that's kind of why I wanted you to speak up, because I know in your context, it is completely different. It is real and it is practical. I appreciate the way you laid that out as, and we see how, as you said, a lot of pastors there would just rather not talk about it out of fear of repercussions. We are not at that point yet in our context. We're more at a point of the engaging of ideas, the fighting for the heart and soul of those in the community over these many issues. Another question I kind of want to just kind of use as a conversation piece is, how can we as Christians engage Muslims, our Muslim neighbors, in evangelism? I know many of you guys do this type of work, but I also want to say, in terms of in a respectful and dignified way, how do you guys? What advice do you guys have for Christians who want to engage their Muslim neighbors? Anybody can jump in. I know all of you guys do a lot of this work.
I think one of the biggest things that's important is to remember that the internet isn't real life, right? So while online you may kind of say certain things or kind of go at topics in certain ways, if the goal is to genuinely reach individual people, it's not that we don't talk about those things, but we have to do those things knowing that the person we're talking to is an individual who, even though they may have a tough exterior, may actually really be wrestling with and thinking about the things you're sharing. And so I think it's super important when talking with a Muslim to recognize how the divergence has really stemmed from different foundations, so to speak, right? So if you just start going into a conversation and saying, oh, well, you believe this and I believe this, and here's why I'm right and you're wrong and this and that, I mean, you may get somewhere with a person. But a lot of times Muslims, as Lewis noted when trying to talk, you get to a certain point, they don't even want to hear it anymore, right? And I think that even though it's not foolproof, something that's very important is to emphasize how, look, we don't agree on this particular issue or this whole host of issues or whatever it is, but here's why we don't agree, right? I'm starting with the Bible. I'm starting with God's word. I'm starting with X, Y, Z. So therefore, if I'm building my foundation on these things, you can see why then I'm going to have all these different positions that I hold. You're starting with this other foundation. Therefore, even if I disagree, it's no surprise that you hold the positions you hold, right? It's like, I mean, take the same example with like someone who believes in God versus who doesn't believe in God. They're going to come up with two wildly different answers regarding how they answer or respond to certain moral issues, if they would even call it moral, because of the fact that in their mind, there's no ultimate authority, right? So it's going to affect the way they answer certain things. So even though I disagree with them, I still make sure I take the time to say, look, if I had your same worldview, I get why you believe what you believe, right? I get why you don't think there should be any limits placed on this or any restrictions on that. But because I have a different worldview, even though you disagree with me, can you at least see why I'm coming to this conclusion? They'll say, yeah. And then from there, that's where justifying your own foundation, I think, is crucial. Okay, well, if you see then, here's why I take the foundation that I do. Here's why I believe this is God's word. Here's why I believe that Muhammad wasn't a prophet versus, these other people in the Bible, whatever it may be. You're going to still have to get, down and dirty into some of these issues that aren't going to be comfortable. I know it, but I think that it can help soften the blow in some ways if they know, okay, he's not doing this because he's coming after me, or he just hates Muslims, or he's an Islamophobe or whatever. It's because, one, he's trying to reach me, and two, it's no surprise that he would have this divergence of opinion given the fact that we're not starting on the same foundation. And that's huge because Muslims will think it's the same foundation, right? They'll think that, we all have the same faith, we're all the Abrahamic religions and this and that. But I think showing that, no, like the Abraham in the Quran and the hadith is not the Abraham of the Bible, right? The Jesus of the Quran is not, all these sorts of things. So it comes down to that lack of ignorance. They think we're on the same foundation with whatever specific thing we're looking at, but the evidence shows that we're clearly not.
Yeah.
I would touch on what Ayo's talking about also. If you're talking about evangelism, when I started my talk today and I ended, I said, Kevin, no one cares how much you know till they see how much you care. If you're there, they win a debate or argument, what does it prove? They don't prove nothing. They leave mad, you leave mad, it's done. So friendship is important, listening to, and having a dialogue is important, not a monologue. And when I go to the mosque, and I like to ask the Muslim questions like, what do I need to do to enter Jinnah? And they'll tell me. And then when I ask them, oh, have you done that? Yeah. I believe in Muhammad. I believe in Allah. Good. You're going to Jinnah. Oh, I don't know. And I said, well, if you don't know, then why would you tell me that? And then I don't start talking about you need to put faith in Jesus and that he died, he was buried, and he was resurrected. Surah 4, 157 and 58 says that Jesus was not killed on a cross. They made someone to look like him. So where I come with common ground is I like to talk about Abraham and Surah 37, 102 through 108 about Abraham and his vision. But I'd let the Muslims, Kevin, and you guys tell me. Well, Abraham he had a vision, and I'll make it, I know we're on the time. Abraham had a vision, and in his vision, God told him to sacrifice his son. It was to test his faith. Allah seen that he passed the test, that he had the knife to his son's jugular vein. They believe it's Ishmael. I don't argue who the son is because you'll lose it. But God seen that he passed the test. But in the Quran in Arabic, Kevin and you guys, it says that he sent the lamb down, Tanzil, from heaven as a substitution. So I always ask Muslims, you guys, why did he do that? I said, was he obedient? And they said, yes. I said, did he pass the test? Yes. Did he submit? Yes. Then why was the lamb sit down? They don't have an answer. And then quickly, I'll just talk about how God told Moses, without the shedding of blood, there's no remission of sin. And then I tell him that it's mercy, grace, and compassion. But I tell him, did you know that Yahya in the Holy Injil, which is a mighty prophet named John the Baptist, it talks about Allah sent the second lamb down from heaven. And they're like, what? I just recently had this happen. And they're like, no, that's not on the cross. I says, no, it's not. But the second lamb that was on the river going to that prophet to be baptized, when John the Baptist, the prophet, seen Jesus, he said, behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. So then I can go from a platform to go ahead and share with him.
That's good. That's good. So what you recommend is really we have to understand what they believe. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, you have to understand what they believe. And let's say if you don't know a lot about them, just ask questions. You can ask questions, but I would say go back, do research. Go to buy books or listen to people like David Wood, Vocab, Truth Defenders, IO, even you, Kevin. Go and listen to people, talk to people. Like I said, I'm on that battleground. I'm in those trenches, but I listen to the Muslims. And I even tell them this. I said that I'm not here to debate, argue with you, and I'm not asking you to believe what I believe, but tell me what you believe. And now give me a second to tell you what I believe. So I'm setting the lines of dialogue, and I'm not forcing their back to, hey, you have to go ahead and believe this. Because all we're doing is we're watering seeds and we're planting seeds, and it's all the Holy Spirit.
Yeah. In the chat, okay. I was just going to ask about the question because I didn't see the question. So we have a question from the chat. Veritology asked, I'd imagine that a lot of these would not be common knowledge. How do we establish credibility for these quotes?
You have to understand their concept of credibility. For instance, with the science of hadith, this is going to be brought up often. The chain of narration, the people in the chains, and by that meaning, he said, she said, all the way down from an eyewitness to Muhammad to when it was written down and compiled. They trust in what's called an isnad, a chain of narration, and they believe that the more people you have in the chain without any gaps in between the people that are transmitting the information, the more credible it is. The problem with that is that this so-called science of hadith came later. The hadiths were already there, and the acceptance of a lot of these problematic narrations were already universally accepted before they brought in the science of hadith to dismiss them based on the criteria they invented. But they believe it to be credible. So they've labeled them sahih, authentic, or credible. So you simply use them, their standards, and say, look, this is by your scholars considered authentic, credible. So unless you're an authority within Islam, you have to give me something better than just, I don't accept it. Also, even with weak narrations, as I said earlier, a weak narration can be elevated to the status of strong based on the multiplicity of references. This is known as the science of hadith. Also, there are commentators, the tafsirs. So you have to get familiar with the terminology, tongue twisters, because of the Arabic. But once you reference them and say, well, and if they give you a counter scholar on it, now you have to put them in the dilemma and say, look, you're only showing me that your own scholars don't agree on these narrations. If they don't agree, then why do you expect me to follow that? So now you put them in the situation where they have to somehow explain as to why something is authoritative and why it's not. And once they give you that criteria, hold their feet to the fire with it and say, good. Then by that same standard and criteria, you have to accept this reference that I'm giving you. And then you cite the chapter and book. So always be ready to give the references.
And I wanted to add this on to what Lewis is saying real quickly. You did an excellent job to citing the hadiths and stuff. Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, again, Sahih mean authentic, or those books, Sahih Muslim, Sahih Bukhari, are what I would say you would invest in if you want to do Muslim apologetics and to Muslims. And I learned to ask questions. Yeah, how would you answer this? I have this quote here. I got this right here in this book, Sahih Bukhari, and it says right here where Muhammad went ahead and said this. So how would you answer that? And so I learned to ask questions. That way it's not a debate. You're not arguing. Look, this is what it says right here. You know, you're putting it back on them. And if they try explaining it away, says, no, I don't see that. I'm looking right here. I got the book, and this is what it's saying. Do you have a hadith that's saying something different? Or it sounds like you're putting words in Muhammad's mouth, but this is what it's saying right here.
By the way, just for context, I think this question originally came up during Vocab's presentation.
Yeah, one thing in relation to the idea of credibility of sources is, if you have the opportunity, just try to push the issue. So meaning you'll get this automatic response, well, that's a weak hadith. Well, first of all, weak is not fabricated. There's another category that's different. That's fabricated hadith, which are considered like haram to recite as hadith at all. But if they're considered weak, they're actually not even by the Muslim sources considered fabricated at that point. But when I say push the issue, is to try to find out the reason. Now, usually the Muslim you're talking to will probably not know why it's considered weak. They'll say something like, this is like more of a personal experience that I've encountered. The hadith scholars are highly trained in this field, and most you Christians don't really understand the hadith science. It's a deep thing that takes a lifetime to master. And so they make these judgments, and you really can't understand or tell us what's what. Well, then it's like, look at some of the examples of hadith science, so-called inaction, or how things are determined. You'll see sometimes where you'll have another scholar, maybe it's an earlier scholar, that will reject a hadith, and you'll see the reasons. For example, in some of the ones I cited, I looked at some of the reasons why they were given by different scholars for why they would consider it weak. One was, I'm unfamiliar with this person in the isnad chain. So it's just, they didn't know who it was. Interesting that a few of the responses that I looked at for some of the ones that I gave, that why they were considered weak, these overtly racist statements by Muhammad about intermarriage and whatnot, most of them were not, Muhammad wouldn't say something like this. One of them was, this is basically would be out of character for the prophet. The other ones were, I'm unfamiliar with this person, or this person was considered untrustworthy by so-and-so. And when you actually even see the reasons, it's actually very helpful, because you realize how, honestly, what a sham the hadith sciences are. It is true they spend a long time to study them. It is true it's complicated and complex because of the nature of it. But when you boil it down, it's those types of responses are often given. And I think it's insightful and instructive to actually hear the reason why. And then you realize Islam doesn't really have good, authentic sources at all. And even in the one example I gave, that was sort of a pop level of an example of a scholar working through hadith, why or why not. If you notice, he just said things like, well, this is against Islamic teaching, or maybe it means something different in this context. He didn't actually say what else the term that is commonly known to mean Black African, East Black African, more specifically. He didn't say what else it could mean. He didn't say how it could have been sort of just a phrase, or he didn't say how it could have been specific to this people, especially because the actual hadith is they are a distorted creature. That doesn't seem to be localized or contextualized in a high context. It seems to be universalized or generalized. They're a distorted creature. So it's interesting. I would actually say kind of push the issue. We can only do so much. We didn't invent these sources. We're not making up these quotes. By the way, that's actually a lot of times the first thing you'll get when you bring one of these is you made that up. You have to go out of your way if they'll sit there and look, and it's difficult because you have to go on your phone. This is what I've seen happen too. You'll say, okay, let me pull it up. And let's say it's a resource you previously had, but you got to track it down when you're on the street or something like that. A lot of times while that's happening, they just use it to a chance to talk about something else, to switch the topic while you're they actually aren't really, I'm just saying experientially, a lot of times aren't interested in actually seeing what you're going to say if you pull it. They just want to delay you so they can switch to something else. Few Muslims I've been with will actually say, okay, let's wait. And then when they see that it really does exist, some will offer another round of excuses. Every now and then you'll get a Muslim who say, I haven't seen that before. And this is a paraphrase of, I've had a few Muslims say this. I haven't seen that before. Thank you for showing it to me. And I even had one Muslim say, I feel like I'm not doing my deen. Here's a Christian is telling me about my hadith. But he said, I'll look into it. Now, did he? I don't know, but at least it was a more fair-minded take. So in my view, it's just kind of push the issue, try to find out the reasons and get them to say the reasons. And then I would say critique those reasons, because honestly, they're rarely going to be good reasons. And that will expose the larger problem of the hadith narration in the first place. So it's like, we don't have to be afraid of quoting weak hadith. Again, these are not our sources. We did not make this stuff up. We didn't put this in the words of companions. This is not our doing. We're just uncovering them as we see them. So that's what I have to say about that.
Okay. No, that's really good and really helpful. We're coming short on time. We've got to wrap up, but I want to go around and kind of get final thoughts on the, not necessarily this topic, but anything, from today. Kind of 60 seconds, final thoughts. Io, what is your kind of takeaway from today, or what do you want to leave people with?
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for the opportunity to do this. Thank you to Pastor George Saeed for hosting this. I know this topic was very important to him. He himself, I think, was born in Africa, so it's huge. And it was an honor to be able to hear the speakers today as well, and to be able to work alongside them. So in terms of just what I want to say, I just want to encourage anyone out there, whether you're Black, whether you're not Black, if you're in a place where you're considering Islam, or your reasons for leaning toward Islam have lined up with what we've discussed today, just don't let those be the reasons. I think that more than anything, we want to show that no side necessarily is blameless, right? Like, if you think that you're going to leave this one side of things and find refuge in Islam because, at least it's not the white man's religion or this or that, what I aim to show in my presentation today is that couldn't be further from the truth. That doesn't mean Christianity is automatically true, right? We have a bunch of different videos on this channel exploring those things, which I would encourage you to check out. But it does mean that life, history, all these things are much more nuanced than, to be honest, we'd like them to be. It takes more work to do this sort of stuff and to realize that, wow, all the blame just can't be placed on one group of people, but you'll be better off for it. And so my prayer for everyone watching would just be that they'd humble themselves, that they'd consider the things we've talked about. It's easy to deflect and write things off, but each of us have put a lot of time into our presentations. And so my prayer would just be that you check it out with an open mind, think about it with an open mind, and that ultimately it would lead you to saving faith if that's not where you're at yet. So that's why all of us have come here to do this, because we love you, we care about you. And so we just pray for each of you. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Please share it with those who it may be relevant to, and God bless.
Amen. Man,
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
When I first heard your channel name, I thought it was a marriage family advice channel, like a marriage advice channel. The Third Apology. No, good stuff, man.
Vocab. Why? Since you're on the mic, what are your final thoughts?
It is sometimes discouraging. The brothers and sisters in the live chat know as well. You know, you'll do this research, you do the study, and then you'll present it to your Muslim friend. And they just say, well, that's probably invented. You're like, well, hold on, man. I did a lot of work. I'm uncovering this stuff. Look, can we talk about it? But I would just say, look, guys, keep on keeping on. And as was pointed out, this was not to vindicate slavery by other nations or other people groups. That's never the point of this. This isn't, well, the point is why we still need to talk about those injustices and deal with those realities. That's been exposed and talked about a lot. And just, this is so underknown and underheard. And all we're saying, hey, well, let's make sure we air it all out. And so these ideas of like, we were such great slave masters and you know, and everybody wanted us to come liberate them. And Muhammad was the first abolitionist. All these things that we hear, it's like, hold on. I have something for that. Let's have you heard this? Did you know this? What's your opinion to this? How would you react to this? What do you think of this hadith? Have you heard what this Islamist jurors? I think it's important to do that. And then compare that to Jesus. Because guess what, guys? Jesus didn't trade any black slaves. You know why? He didn't own any slaves. He said, I call you friend. Jesus is over there washing people's feet. This is the difference between their guy and ours. It's not even close at all. And so this is a great way to bring that out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Lewis.
Yes, sir. Well, yeah, there's so much more that can be said, and that we probably all have so many more references that we could have produced, but it suffices to say that we've demonstrated from the sources, primary source materials, that Muhammad and Islam are indeed racist, bigoted, and are very controversial in our day and age and throughout history. And there is no reconciling that. There is no way out of it, because it is their foundational doctrines and teachings that have this information in it. So if you were to expunge that, you are basically dismantling Muhammad and his credibility. So that is what Islam teaches. Other religions are also have their issues. Professing people that profess a certain faith might hypocritically misrepresent the religion. We hear that Hitler was a Christian all the time. Hitler was not a Christian. He spoke against Christianity, used religion and paganism and politics for his agenda, but he was not a Christian. But that's one of the rebuttals we'll hear often. Also, another thing is, I want to just encourage people that there are a lot of theistic evolutionists out there. They profess to believe in God, to be Christians, and hold to evolution as well. Not to go off topic, but macro-Darwinian evolution is inherently racist because of the progression of the evolutionary process of biological organisms, where you go from the goo through the zoo to you, and they put the black race down in a lower place. And to use the term race, we have to understand that racism has no place in Christianity. Absolutely zero references in the Bible to different types of human beings, as if we were a different species of people. Yeah. The Bible never speaks of that. It says that we are all created from Adam, one people, and we are diversified by our practices, our cultures, such and so forth. Maybe certain characteristics that we've isolated in different ways, but never because we are of a different race. We are human beings created in the image of God. We have dignity, we have worth. No human being is to be treated like an animal by another human being. In fact, the Bible condemns the maltreatment of animals. How much more a man or a woman created in the image of God? So we have to consider this. There is no place for that in Christianity. Although we live in a culture where we might have lighthearted attitudes about, certain stereotypes, such and so forth, but we can get past that. But when it comes to the seriousness of discrimination, we have to be real careful and know that this is something that is considered a sin. It is ungodly. It is wrong. And just continue to dig in, study the sources, and call people to account for what it is they believe and why they believe it. There has to be a reason for why somebody believes what they do, and it has to be in conformity with reality, with truth, and with biblical revelation. If it isn't, then they need to reconsider their worldview. And Islam fails in every respect.
Amen. Amen. Greg, final word. What you got, brother?
All righty. It's a privilege to go ahead and be on here with all you gentlemen, first of all, and then also to go ahead and speak on at the conference here. And I learned a lot from all of you guys. So, and I would tell anybody who's watching, whether you're a Muslim or not a Muslim, as Vocab said, he mentioned about learning the facts, doing your homework. This stuff is swept under the carpet. You see the Muslim sources. Do your research. Do your homework. I would also mention this, that when I read the Quran, it talks about Muhammad being the sinner. Surah 47:19, 48, 1-2, and Surah 40:55. But this term is used for Jesus, Zakiya, and that means that he's pure, holy, righteous, and sinless. That's in Surah 19:19. But the Jesus of the Quran is not the Jesus of the Bible, first of all. But in the Holy Injil, in the Bible, in Hebrews 4:15 and 1 Peter 2:22 says that Jesus is sinless, holy, righteous, and pure. You can Google the tomb of Muhammad and you'll see millions of Muslims with their prayer rugs crying over and praying over the tomb of Muhammad. But you won't see no Christians doing that, crying over the tomb of Jesus because his remains are there. Jesus is in heaven. He conquered death, but death went ahead and conquered Muhammad. Death went ahead and conquered Elijah Muhammad. His tomb's with us today. So I choose a risen Savior, Jesus Christ. He said that I'm the way, the truth, and the life, and no one can come to the Father except through me. He's more than a mere prophet. Jesus is prophet, priest, and king. Thank you.
Amen. Amen. And I'll just say, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure being on here with you guys. When I was asked to host this, I had no idea what to expect, but man, I've learned so much from you guys today. And just really appreciate the opportunity. Thanks to Pastor George, Ministry to Muslims for doing this. And I'll just say at the Center for Biblical Unity, our motto is one people, one race, one Savior. That is the motto which drives our ministry. And that is reflected in everything you guys said today in terms of what it is that Christ accomplished on the cross and who he accomplished it for. Until next time, we will see you guys, and God bless.